Welcome to Murder and Movies Podcast. As you can tell in the beginning, I'm going to introduce it as kind of girly, but no, we are now Murder and Movies Podcast. We are shifting focus and now going to be talking about, you guessed it, murder and movies. So if you're into that content, then stick around. If not, stick around and continue to give us the viewership because we appreciate it. But yeah, this is going to be the first installment to this new podcast, and we hope you guys enjoyed it in our future videos.
Warning, this podcast contains themes related to child abuse, child endangerment, child death, sexual assault, and murder. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Kinda Girly Podcast, where we kind of talk about everything and we're girls, so it works. I'm Kalyn, and today I'm with the very excited Elizabeth.
I'm so excited.
She's so hype. I was in the bathroom and I just heard her say, "I'm so excited."
I just did so much research, so I'm ready.
She really did. She has a freaking book that's like thickens chickens over there.
She's a little under 800 pages, not counting appendices.
Yeah.
She big.
She really is. But today we're talking about JonBenet Ramsey. I don't know. I know very, very little about this case. I'll tell you all I know. She was a very pretty little girl who was killed. She did pageants. That's about it.
Okay, yeah, fair.
And
Got
you
it.
know a ton more.
I know a lot more. So I also didn't know a lot before you told me that we were doing this. So I was like, oh man, I really got to research. And then I started researching and then I got way too invested. And now I know so much.
It's one of those cases, like, you hear about it all the time. Like, it's a cold case, if anyone didn't know. It's a cold case that has been left unsolved for
over 20 years. I don't know the
crazy.
exact number. It happened in 96.
I was 1. You weren't born.
I was not born. I was -3.
That makes me feel so great about myself.
Yeah, so it is 24 years old.
Wow, that's an adult.
Yeah, she can legally drink now. Yes, and a quick disclaimer, Burke Ramsey and John Ramsey, we are broke. If you sue us, you will get $5 and maybe a high five. So, and also, I'm not an expert in any way. I just did a lot of research in the past 3 weeks and learned a lot. So anything I say, take it with a grain of salt. This is just what I found and what I found interesting. So
Through your Thickens Chickens book.
yes, through this
and
thick
your
as hell book.
notes. Yeah. So let's go through, because again, I know very little about this case. Why is this case, other than the fact that she was a little girl, a pageant girl, like, why is this case so notorious and still, like, people our age know about it? And we were like 1 and -3.
Yeah, so the reason why this case got so much media publicity is because it was at the very beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. So before that, there wasn't like news being broadcasted 24/7 the way there is now. They had just introduced it like a few years before. And also, the O.J. Simpson trial had just wrapped up. So the 24-news hour cycle was brand new. It was lacking things to talk about because O.J. Simpson had just wrapped. And then this case happened, and it caught attention very quickly because of that. And that kind of, at the time, notoriety has led to just kind of continuing notoriety.
Since she was in the pageant world, again, that's one of the few facts I know about her. Was she, like, very well known in that arena?
She had won a couple of things, but she wasn't, like, by any means, like, world famous in the pageant arena. Because, one, the pageant arena wasn't as big as it is now, with, like, toddlers and tiaras and all that. It was much smaller. She had been entered in a couple, I think, local things, maybe a few in different states. With her family was just, like, going there. But she wasn't, like, internationally known for being in pageants.
So it's just one of those cases, it was, like, I hate to say this, right time, right place, and that's why it gained so much traction.
Yeah, pretty much. Like,
Okay.
if this case had happened maybe, like, a year later, there's a good chance it wouldn't have gotten, like, the notoriety that it did.
So let's go ahead and start talking about the facts of the case that you were able to find. Again, I know nothing.
Yes. Okay, so if you already dislike police officers, be prepared to just be pissed as hell because this case definitely brings out those emotions. Just a pre-warning. December 25th of 1996, John and Patsy Ramsey and their kids opened presents in the morning. They had 2 kids. They had JonBenet and their son Burke, who was 3 years older, and he was 9 years old. So they're opening presents. They are playing with all their presents, and then they go to their friend's house to have a little celebration for Christmas. And then they went home, and JonBenet was already asleep, so her dad carried her up to. This is what they said happened, is that her dad carried her up to bed, tucked her into bed, gave her a kiss. Her mom came in, changed her outfit. One of them read her a book, and she never woke up. She was asleep. The family was going out of town the next morning. They were going to their house in Michigan to celebrate Christmas with John Ramsey's 2 older children that he had from a previous marriage.
So wait, she was named after her dad?
Yes. Okay. So his name is JonBenet, and her name is JonBenet.
You know what? That's actually kind of cute.
Right? It's very cute.
I don't hate that.
Right? And apparently she was very proud of the fact that she was named after her dad. She was she loved him. He worked a lot, so he wasn't home a lot. But she was very proud of the fact she was named after her dad. Anyway, so they were going to go out of town the next morning. And so they had taken JonBenet's little dog to the neighbors, and he was staying with the neighbors, which was not something unusual. Apparently the dog stayed at the neighbors a lot, but the dog was not in the house this night. So everyone goes to bed. And then Patsy Ramsey wakes up at 5 in the morning, gets ready, and goes to go down stairs. And her and her husband's bedroom was on the 3rd floor of this house, which had a 3rd floor, a 2nd floor, the main floor, and a basement.
So they had money?
Oh, yeah. So John Ramsey was in charge of a company called, I think, Access Graphics that had been bought out by another big name company that for some reason I'm blanking on, and he had just done his first $1 billion in sales that year.
So
they had money.
Yeah, they were millionaires.
Yeah, they were millionaires. Yeah, and Patsy was a stay-at-home mom. Anyway, so Patsy says that she woke up, she got ready, she went downstairs, and then she did some laundry, which was the laundry room was right outside JonBenet's room. She let her kids sleep a little. She was going to let her kids sleep a little longer while she got stuff ready to go. And they had a back stairway that was a spiral staircase. And so Patsy goes down the spiral staircase, and on the 3rd step, spread out next to each other, were 3 pieces of paper with handwriting on them. And so she reads it, and she sees it says, Mr. Ramsey.
So it was on the stairs?
Yes, they were spread out on the stairs, right next to each other, not stacked,
Mm-hmm.
And so she reads it, and she sees Mr. Ramsey, and at first she's like, oh, it's for my husband, whatever. But then she reads a little more, and I have the whole note. Do you want me to read it?
Go for it.
Okay. So it said, this is what the ransom note said. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you will follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money, and hence an earlier delivery. Here the word delivery was written and then crossed out. An earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you do not provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Do not try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC.
FBS.
So like Sierra, Bravo, Target,
Tango,
Charlie?
Yeah.
My fiance's in the Army. I know
Yay.
military language. So that was the ransom note.
That was all over the place.
She was long.
Yeah.
She took up 2.5 pages of paper.
There's a lot in there that I was like, that's very specific. Like the amount of money, that's very specific. The like fat cat thing. I was like, how old is this person? Who used that?
Oh, yes.
Granted, that was the 90s. I don't know when that was a thing.
No. We'll get into that later.
Oh.
So after Patsy finds this note, she yells for John to wake him up and is like, look at what I found. And so while he is reading the note, she runs and checks JonBenet's room, finds JonBenet is not there, and runs and checks Burke's room because sometimes JonBenet would go sleep in her brother's room. She's not there. Burke is asleep. So she runs and like asks her husband, like, what do I do? And he's like, well, obviously you call 911. And so she immediately does that.
That was one of the things. You're not supposed to do it.
Yeah, but also you always hear about people who don't and their kid dies anyway and they lose money. So, like, I don't fault them for calling 911. Personally, I would have also called 911.
I wonder, do you think that would have made a difference if they had it?
No.
Okay.
And you'll find out why. On December 26th at 5:52 a.m., Patsy calls 911. She's very panicked. Like, my daughter's missing. Like, send help immediately. There's been an abduction. 911 person is like, who are you? She goes, I'm the mother. It's my daughter. Blonde hair. Like, trying to describe her. And then the 911 is like, okay, police are on the way. And Patsy tries to hang up the phone. She misses, and there's like a little bit of like noise, but then she hangs up the phone. So
I'm guessing that comes up later.
It does come up later.
Okay.
Yes. So immediately after calling the police at 5:54, so 2 minutes after calling the police, Patsy calls family and friends to come over and help search for JonBenet and like keep them company. That's what I find suspicious. Because, like, why are you immediately calling friends and family?
I don't know. I feel like if my child went missing, the first person, well, other than the police, I'm calling is my mom.
That's
and if she was
true.
close, I would definitely want her to come over to console me.
That's
and,
kind of
like,
true.
I don't know.
Anyways, so at 6 a.m., the first police officer arrives at the Ramseys' house. Between 6 and 8, 4 more officers would arrive. So would the Ramseys' friends that they called. The Reverend would arrive, because they also called their Reverend. Victims' advocates would arrive, and CSI arrived.
What? They took this, like, extra serious.
Yeah, they had, in the time, so this took place in Boulder, Colorado, which I do think I forgot to mention. At the time, Boulder had just passed a thing that, like, victim advocates would go there and, like, comfort the family, basically. So then at 8:10, the first detective, a detective named Linda Arndt, arrives. It was very hard for them to get people to come because it was literally the day off after Christmas. A lot of people were still off on vacation, out of town with their families. So they were kind of like struggling to get people to come. But the first detective finally arrives at 8:10. The ransom call, if you remember, was said that it was going to come between 8 and 10. That time passes and there is no phone call. So at 10:30, John Ramsey goes missing for about an hour. So there's only one detective on scene, and it is still Linda Arndt, and there's one police officer on the front door, and that is all of like the people there to monitor the Ramseys, all of their friends who came, and the Reverend and the victim's advocate. So they're kind of like spread thin, trying to keep track of all these people.
So I don't know if it's just me, but wouldn't it be or make more sense that if the child disappeared within the house, you wouldn't want all these people in the house possibly tampering with evidence?
Yeah, so
Okay.
when a police officer first arrived, he did like a quick check of the house, didn't see her. When the Ramseys' friends, specifically the Whites, when they arrived, the husband, whose name is Fleet, I don't know why, I think it's so funny. His name is Fleet
unique
White.
names.
I know, right? He searches the house, and he doesn't find anything. Anyway, so at 10:30, John Ramsey goes missing for about an hour. That just means he could have like gone outside. I think he claimed that he went to check the mail, which was later disputed because the Ramseys' mail got delivered through a mail slot in their front door, but that was just one theory that I heard. At 1 p.m., Detective Arndt tells John Ramsey to take his friend and search the house and look for things that are out of order. There are some things that say that she told him to search top to bottom, but there are also some that don't. Immediately, John Ramsey grabs his friend and they go down to the basement, particularly to what they called the wine cellar in the basement, which meant they went downstairs, went through a couple of rooms to like this back closet door. John Ramsey opens the door and cries, "Oh my God, she's here," and goes in, turns on the light, goes in, and JonBenet is on the ground, covered by a white blanket with like her arm sticking out. John Ramsey immediately takes tape off of her mouth, unties one of her hands, which had been tied, and then picks her up and carries her upstairs and sets her down like in the living room area. And that's all at like 1 p.m. So after that, Detective Arndt moves the body again out of the living room to a less trafficked area, at which point she takes a throw blanket and puts it over the body, potentially contaminating it with other DNA from where the throw blanket was.
Okay, here's my thing. I know that not everyone is a detective, and it may just be because I'm so into crime stuff. I just don't, you do not touch the body. Do not move the body. If someone is obviously dead, do not touch them.
Yeah.
And they're moving this body up, down, left, around, everywhere.
Yeah. And so like what they said is like, oh, maybe John Ramsey like didn't realize that she was dead, but like she was cold and rigor mortis had already set in.
So she
like,
was stiff.
Yeah, so like they knew she was dead. And then so following that, obviously more detectives and police arrive. At this point, it's been declared a homicide. And so they're all in the house like taking pictures, and one person at 1:40 overhears John Ramsey calling his pilot and tells him to prepare a plane to fly to Atlanta, which is suspicious because his daughter's body had just been found 40 minutes earlier.
What's in Atlanta? Did they have like another home?
That is where Patsy was from and where her family was from and where they like lived originally before they moved to Boulder for John's company.
I don't think if I was trying to, well, you know, theoretically speaking, if I was thinking that I was about to get in trouble for something, I would not go to Atlanta.
Yeah,
They're going to get your ass in Atlanta.
Yeah. And so police, after hearing John Ramsey say this, are like, hey, you actually can't leave the state. We have an active investigation. And he says, I just want to get my family like out of here, get them somewhere safe. But he accepts and they don't leave the state. 3 days later, JonBenet's body is released after the autopsy. And they take her body to Atlanta to be buried. One of John's older children had died in a car accident years prior, and they wanted to bury her next to her sister. So they took the body to Atlanta. At this point, John and Patsy had still not been formally interviewed by the police. And then, January 1st, after the funeral, John and Patsy do an interview with CNN. At this point, they have still not formally spoken to the police.
You know what this case kind of reminds me of? And I cannot remember the little girl's name, but it's the one that happened in Portugal, I believe, about the family that was staying in this hotel.
Oh,
the little girl got kidnapped from the window, and everyone was like looking at the parents because they were running to the media every 5 minutes. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that. I forget what her name was.
I do too, but I remember what you're talking about because that was more recent. So that concludes the kind of like timeline that I had compiled. So now I'm going to get into some of the evidence and then some of the ways that the evidence was corrupted, because there's a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then like some of the other shady stuff that happened. Evidence. The first, they considered it their biggest piece of evidence, was the ransom note. Mm-hmm. So while they were investigating the ransom note, they found a notepad in the house that perfectly matched the ransom note and the pin that the note was written in the house, which means that the person who wrote this note did it in the house, which is weird because it's a long note. Mm-hmm. I watched one of the documentaries they had a bunch of people try writing it out to see how long it took, and it took them like over 20 minutes to write this out. So you are either kidnapping or just murdered someone, and you're going to stop and write a 2.5 page long note. It's kind of suspicious, but okay. The amount of money listed, $118,000, was almost an exact match to the amount that John Ramsey had made as a bonus that year. And keep in mind, this family is millionaires. If these kidnappers had wanted to, they could have asked for $1 million, and John Ramsey could have done it. But instead, they asked for $118,000.
Yeah, because I was like, he's got money, and that's a very specific amount.
Yes. Not to mention, the note was incredibly long. And a lot of it was stolen directly from popular movies at the time.
So, like, Fat Cat, that was probably something.
Yeah.
Because that was so misplaced in the entire letter.
So there was a movie at the time that was like, if we see you talking to a mailbox, she dies. And if you remember in the JonBenet letter, it was, if we see you talking to a stray dog, she dies.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, like, a lot of similarities that were pulled from, like, movies.
So they were looking for a movie fanatic.
Pretty much. And also, 76% of the note was extraneous. So it did not need to be in there. And most of the time with kidnappings, when they see notes, it's like one paragraph that's like 3 sentences. Like, we have this person. These are our demands. We will follow up.
It's
or
not
something
like a
that.
Journal.
Yeah, it's
like,
not 2.5 pages. Like, that's insane. They also found practice copies of the note in the trash. So that means that not only had this person written the note in the house, they had practiced it before, which would have taken more time. Yeah.
Okay.
Patsy found it and immediately called 911, even though the note specifically said not to. Said that they would call between 8 and 10, yet no call came, and it was never acknowledged that no call came, like, within the house, apparently. Like, when 8 to 10 passed, like, Patsy and John were never like, why didn't they call? Like, they just kind of, like, let it go. Which, like, if my kid was dead and no phone call came when they said there would be, we're not even dead, just, like, missing. I'd be freaking out because at this point they didn't know she was dead. The ransom note became, like, a #1 big piece of evidence. They did, like, analysis of it and everything, and they took handwriting. Everyone they interviewed, they got handwriting analysis from, and that'll come in later. But it was believed that the note was basically written to hide the true reason that the killer was there, especially since they found JonBenet's body, which means they either killed her and then wrote the note, or they wrote the note, kidnapped her, and then accidentally killed her. But then why would you not go steal the note?
In the place where they found it, just based on your detail of it, wouldn't you have to know that area existed?
And that was, like,
put the body there?
Oh, yeah, that's another thing, where the body was. But, like, even where the note was found, like, it was Patsy's, like, tradition to go down the back stairs every morning. Like, if I was leaving a note and I for sure wanted it to be found, I'd put it on, like, the counter or something.
That's why when you said, I was like, on the stairs?
Yeah. It was found on the stairs. So then the murder weapon. So the way that JonBenet was murdered is incredibly graphic. There was a toss-up. A lot of people said that she was garroted, and some people said it was like a noose.
What's garroted?
I don't know. Basically, what they found was a noose.
Mm-hmm.
It was wrapped around her neck, and then on one end was the broken handle of a paintbrush that was then used as, like, leverage to, like, pull. And they pulled hard. When they found her, the ligature was so deep in her neck that it had, like, cut into her skin.
Damn.
Like, I saw pictures of it, and, like, it took a lot of strength.
A paintbrush? Why?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. The murder weapon was things found in the house. Which means, like, maybe they didn't intend to kill her, but then the weapon was made because it was a rope tied around a paintbrush. So, like, they committed to killing her, I guess, once they decided they were going to.
I feel like there was a much easier way to do that. The paintbrush, I don't know why I'm hung up on that.
Yeah. But then there was no evidence that she fought back against being strangled. Which, like, if someone even tries to go anywhere near my neck, I'm running.
So they're thinking she was drugged or something?
So once they started doing the autopsy, they found that her skull had a giant hole in it.
Oh.
And basically, she had been hit on the head hard enough that it cracked her skull, but not hard enough that it broke the skin. Yeah. So the murder weapon was made from things found in the house, namely a paintbrush from Patsy Ramsey's paint set.
That was in the basement?
That was in the basement, yeah. In regards to the, hole in the head, they believed they matched it up to a flashlight. They said that it, fit almost perfectly to this hole in her head. It was this heavy-duty flashlight that no one in the house would claim. The Ramseys were like, well, yeah, we have a flashlight like that, but we usually keep it in a drawer. So, we don't know how it got on the counter because it was found upstairs on the kitchen counter. So then they looked at the flashlight and there was no DNA or fingerprints on it anywhere, even the batteries, which is, incredibly suspicious because, when you put in batteries, your fingerprints are going to be on that sucker. So that means that someone wiped off the fingerprints off the batteries
and had time to.
Yeah, or was wearing a glove when they put the batteries in.
But they would have had to have access to the house, right?
Yeah. I'll get into that too.
There's just so much, so I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. So then they said there were signs of a sexual assault on JonBenet's body. When they did a DNA test, they found DNA evidence in her underwear that they never accounted for, and that was ultimately used to exclude a lot of potential perpetrators. Suspects.
Wait, so they collected that evidence and they tested it? They ran it?
Yeah, so anytime they would talk to someone, they would be like, hey, can we take some DNA? And then they would run it against the DNA they found in her underwear.
So it didn't match anybody that...
They didn't match anybody that they tested. The further evidence that there was sexual assault was she had abrasions on her vagina and that her... What's it called? The hymen? Her hymen seemed to have been ruptured recently.
Damn.
They found evidence of cellulose, so natural materials, also inside of her vagina, which they think could have been pieces from the broken paintbrush. So they think the other end of the paintbrush that was used to make the garrote was used to strangle her, or that whoever had broken and the paintbrush and made the garrote had gotten some of it on their finger and then used that to assault her. Yeah. One counter argument to potentially her not being sexually assaulted is that the evidence in her underwear could have come from her trading clothes with a friend from school, which, why would you trade underwear? I think even, 6-year-olds know not to trade underwear.
I don't know. It depends on if there was, a cool cartoon character on the underwear, and I'm like, oh, my God.
They just said Wednesday on them. They were just days of the week underwear.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was it Wednesday?
I don't remember. One group did an investigation where they opened a brand new pack of underwear and swabbed them and found that they had DNA on them.
That's gross.
Yeah, just from the production company.
Ugh.
Yeah, and this is the story of why now I'm going to wash everything before I put it on.
I can only imagine bathing suits that you buy, even though it has that little strip on there. Oh.
And then something that I thought that I didn't see anywhere else is something that could account for the vaginal trauma is she had literally gotten a bike for Christmas.
And that can cause trauma to your private?
Yeah, think about how you sit on a bike. And then if you go over a bump, have you never
I don't know how to ride a bike.
Oh,
never done it.
It can hurt. And it can cause trauma. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it could not. I'm not an expert. It was just an idea I had. And if it turns out to be a big break in the case, I want credit. Elizabeth Thompson, thank you. But yeah, so there was evidence of sexual assault. During the autopsy, they also found strange marks on her neck and lower back. And some people who were hired by the Ramseys to do a further investigation, because they very early on lost hope in the police, and I'll go over that as well. Someone who was hired by the Ramseys thought that they could have been stun gun marks. And so they did a lot of search into this. They found like potential matches. Immediately the police were like, that is not possible. By being shocked by a stun gun, could explain the fact that JonBenet was found with urine in her underwear in bed, like she had wet herself. However, JonBenet was known to like she had regressed in potty training because her mom had cancer and it had scared her, so she regressed in potty training. Using a stun gun could have accounted for that. However, in a documentary, some people did a test on a grown man, and a stun gun doesn't knock you out. It just...
A grown man.
Yeah, they didn't test it on a kid because...
You can't.
That's illegal. But it was theorized that she probably would not have made her pass out, but it probably would have made her like scream or cry out, which someone would have heard, but people claim that they didn't hear anything. Further, when they did more testing, the marks did not line up. The marks from a stun gun did not line up with the wounds on her body, because the ones on her body were like little circles that were like a weird distance apart, and like the marks from a stun gun are more like irritation marks than like specific circles, and these were like circles with like bruises in them, if that makes sense. And then the stun gun company said that there was no way that their products could have possibly made those marks. The parents were also acting incredibly weirdly.
Yeah.
Like during this whole thing, like trying to leave the state immediately. And then John Ramsey in particular was acting weird. He like was not showing emotion. He was like very like held together, very put together. But apparently behind the scenes, he would like break down and cry when there was like no one to see, like very few people to see him. Like he would only really like show his emotions in front of people, and they accounted for that, saying he had lost his older daughter in a horrible car accident earlier, and that could be why he's like a little bit more put together, is because he had already experienced a trauma, and so he kind of knows how it's better to deal with it, which is weird, but everyone deals with grief differently.
I feel like this is a different scenario too, because a car crash, you have no one to blame but I'm guessing the car or whatever it was that caused that. But this is like also someone close to you, who knows your family's habits, and that doesn't cause you like paranoia.
Yeah. So there was also inconclusive evidence of which injury had happened first, whether the head injury or the garrote injury had happened first. They just didn't know. However, the head injury happening first would account for why there was like no evidence of a struggle. In the basement, near the body, they found a shoe print for a high-tech shoe. That shoe was never identified. There was duct tape on JonBenet's mouth that John Ramsey had pulled off. And in that duct tape were fibers from a shirt that Patsy had had on the night before. But that could have just happened because Patsy lived in the house. And like, say she had like hugged JonBenet goodnight, which we know she did. The fibers, they could have transferred like naturally. There was also evidence that the duct tape was applied to her face after she was dead. Because if it happened while she was alive, the duct tape would have like bonded with her skin, and when it like was taken off, there would have been like trauma to her skin, but there was no evidence of trauma. So it was likely that the duct tape was put on her mouth after she was dead to kind of like stage the crime. JonBenet's body was found at 1 p.m. despite the fact that Fleet White claims he checked that room beforehand.
That's what I was saying. Like, the detective said they searched it.
So the police officer who searched openly admitted to the fact that he did not check that room. He went down into the basement, saw that that door was closed. It was hard to get to, so he just assumed, like, it was empty. And to this day, he actually lives with, like, a lot of grief about that. So, like, please don't attack this man. Like, he legit felt really bad about that. Like, he was like, what if I could have saved her? So, like, he feels bad enough. Don't make it worse.
Or could have poked holes in stories if the body hadn't been there, and then an hour later it was there.
So Fleet White, John Ramsey's best friend, when he got to the house, he searched, and he did go in that room, and he claimed he didn't see anything.
Why was no one following him?
Like, the police had just gotten there, and there was only one officer there, so he couldn't keep track of everyone.
Yeah.
So he says that he opened the door, saw a dark room, didn't see anything in it, closed the door, went upstairs. Because the room was so dark, they think that the reason that Fleet White didn't see the body was because he didn't cross the threshold into the room to like let ambient light in behind him, and he didn't know where the light switch was, so he didn't turn on the light.
Okay, question. I don't know if you get into this. How long had the body been dead before it was found?
So I think they said the earliest she could have died would have been at like midnight. So she would have been dead for over 12 hours at the earliest.
Isn't there a chance the body would have smelled?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't know when bodies start smelling.
I don't know, but like you're assuming that she like peed herself, right? So there's urine.
No, I forgot to mention this, but you know how when I said earlier there was signs of sexual assault?
Mm-hmm.
There was also signs that she had been wiped clean.
Oh.
So there was urine on her underwear, but none on her skin.
I wonder, that's something I'll look up later, like how long it takes until you smell a body. Because I've heard, like, even if you've never.
It's like a distinct smell.
Yeah, like you know that smell even if you don't know that smell.
Yeah. It didn't mention none of the, like, sources that I used mentioned anything about a smell, so. But the theory is that because Fleet White did not cross the threshold, there was no ambient light to land on the body. However, it is said that John Ramsey, before he turned on the light, before he crossed the threshold, said, "She's here." The FBI did eventually get involved, and apparently, like historically, children at this age are killed by parents. If like they're murdered, it's usually by their parents.
Same with wives. If a wife dies, it's usually the husband.
Yeah. Remember when I like mentioned the 911 call, how it's like she didn't hang it up correctly? So the 911 operator says that she heard additional conversation after the call, and that she said she heard Patsy say, "Okay, I call 911, now what?" in a much calmer voice. Like she wasn't freaking out anymore. As soon as they got the 911 call, they enhanced it, and they said that they heard John Ramsey say, "We're not talking to you." And then a third voice say, "What did you find?" And there were only 4 people in that house, and one of them was dead.
And the other was a 9-year-old.
And the other was the 9-year-old Burke. If they did hear another voice, they think that it was Burke Ramsey. However, the parents claim, and Burke claim, that he was asleep the entire morning until his parents took him to a friend's house where he stayed for the duration of the day, like after his sister, even before his sister was located.
So question, did they interrogate Burke? Can you interrogate a 9-year-old?
Yes. So I'll get into that as well. So in the basement, they found a broken and open window, which could have been a way that an intruder could have gotten in. There was leaves and debris disturbed outside of the window. One side of it had been disturbed, the other has not, indicating that like someone could have gotten in. However, the way the window was set up, because it was to go into the basement, was there was like a metal grate over this opening, and then you open the metal grate, dropped into like this little area, and then would have had to like slide through the window into the basement. So kind of complicated.
Yeah.
But there was debris in the house from like someone going in and out of the window. There was a spider web across the window that had not been disturbed. And it was winter, so spiders are not active during the winter. And it was pretty dirty, so it looked like it had been there for a while. When asked about the window, John Ramsey claimed that he had gotten locked out and forgotten his keys, and he was the one who broke the window to get in. However, multiple employees of the Ramseys claim that they never saw the broken window. And that includes like the groundskeeper, the maid, like they did not see the broken window. And during the autopsy, they found food in the small intestine, which meant that it was digested somewhat recently. And they theorized that it was pineapple, which was known to be JonBenet's favorite, like, food or fruit. And then in the house, they found a bowl of pineapple and milk, which was apparently a favorite dessert of the Ramsey children, with fingerprints from Burke and Patsy on it, on the counter, and it was still decently full, as if it had been unfinished. The parents, however, claim that when they got home from the party, they took JonBenet directly up to bed. She didn't have any pineapple that night. So there was like no evidence for why it should be in her stomach. And then her wrists, when she was tied up, her wrists were tied very loosely, which was more evidence to like the idea that it could have been a staged crime scene. So that is the bulk of the evidence that they found at the crime scene. So here is how the evidence was corrupted, or like just other weird things about the crime scene that I kind of found suspicious. So first off, a bunch of people went into the house.
Yeah.
Like ruining evidence. Like friends and family were in the house, a reverend was in the house, victim advocates, the parents, the brother, police, in and out of the house. So there was probably a lot of evidence that got ruined because of that.
Question, is it nowadays that police protocol is if it's a crime scene that is centered around a home, no one is allowed to come in?
Yes, and it was protocol then too.
And they just were like, F it.
I think off camera, our sound person had mentioned that the Ramseys were very wealthy. And because of that, very early on in the investigation, the police were treating them as victims. At no point did the police separate the parents and interview them, because it is protocol that you separate parents and interview them separately, like immediately after a crime happens. They didn't do that. They also, as they were finding evidence throughout the house, were sharing it with the parents. JonBenet, as we said earlier, he moved the body.
Mm-hmm.
In his process of moving the body, he touched and kissed her, which, like, if my kid was dead, like, I probably would too.
I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm not sure if it's because I've watched a lot of crime things or because I'm not emotionally in this situation, but you don't touch the body.
Yeah. And then Patsy, when she found out that JonBenet was dead, she hysterically, like, started screaming and crying, like, threw herself on the body. It was, like, hugging it and kissing it. She was apparently incredibly hysterical, though. She was, like, praying to God, like, raise my daughter up like you did Lazarus, like, take me instead, like, I'll trade my life for hers, like, all this. Like, she was hysterical, apparently. It's also super suspicious that when John found the body, he went immediately to that room, apparently. Like, he grabbed his friend Fleet, like, went down into the basement, and then beelined for the wine cellar and opened that door and found her body.
It's kind of like Laundry's parents. They found him immediately.
Yes. And so usually, if someone has perpetrated a crime, they will want friends or family there to, like, be like, oh my God, no, it couldn't have been them. They reacted so dramatically. Like,
to, like, validate
To
them.
validate, yeah. But that's just a theory. The police on duty that night were very limited. So there was only one police officer guarding the front door and the one detective in the house with everyone. And this is a big house. It had something like 15 rooms.
I wish.
Like, it was not a small home.
So again, whoever hid her body would have had to have known that little tiny room in the basement was there.
Yeah. The main guy on the case, his name was Eller. I don't remember his first name. It was Detective Eller. He did some shady stuff. 3 days after the crime, they were going to go take JonBenet's body to bury her in Atlanta, and they still had not formally been interviewed by the police, the parents. So Detective Eller said he would not release the body until they talked to him. He was holding the dead body of a 6-year-old girl hostage because he failed to do his job sooner, which is so messed up. Like, even if they are guilty, like, dude, that's messed up. The police said that they searched the property and that there were no footprints anywhere in the snow because it had snowed earlier, and that, so if anyone had approached the house from anywhere other than the walkways, because apparently the walkways had been cleared, but if there was, like, anyone had stepped in the yard, there were going to be footprints. However, there was one person who was there the day of who said that they know for a fact their footprints were in the snow because they walked around the side of the house when they first arrived, and their footprints would have been in the snow, but the police never asked for their shoes, and they never looked for footprints.
They give me a headache.
Yeah. So that takes me back to the the shoe print that was found in the basement. No one's shoes who were there the day of were looked at, except for the Ramseys.
You have a group of potential witnesses and people who could have committed the crime,
And they
you
didn't
checked none of them?
Nope. Further, Detective Arndt, the detective who got there very early on, who was like the first detective there, after the Ramseys left to go to bury their daughter, she sent a letter to their lawyers because the Ramseys had already gotten lawyers. Not because they wanted them. It sounded like very much like one of their friends was like, look, you're getting lawyers. I don't care what you say. So she sent a note to the parents asking questions, and some of the questions shared evidence, and she had not been authorized to send this note. So she sent a note being like, did your daughter eat pineapple that day? And they hadn't told anyone yet that they believed she might have eaten pineapple. So like she sent a note basically being like, hey, if you did kill your kid, say if
you need to come up with a story.
Yeah.
Okay, question.
Yes.
I don't know if you get into this. Did they ever, years, you said it's been 24 years or something like that since the case, have they ever been able to connect the family to the police? Like there's any kind of relationship there or any benefit gains?
So very early on, like after like the first day basically, the police were like, yeah, the parents did it. And they refused to look at any other suspects. So like from the get-go, they were like, oh, we know the parents did it. Like, the parents for sure did it. And they started telling the media, like, things that made the parents look super guilty. The parents were not interviewed by the police for the first time until April. Like, 5 months after their daughter's body was found. They zeroed in on the parents. Like I said, they, like, threatened to withhold the body. And because of that, like, the parents were like, listen, we're not going to cooperate with you. Like, at all. Granted, they did let Burke talk with a child psychologist. So Burke was interviewed first the day, like, right after JonBenét's body was found, and then 2 weeks later.
That's what they should have done with the parents.
Yeah.
Individually.
Yeah. So they claim that Patsy always wanted to look like her daughter. She always wanted to dress the same as her daughter. The day of this party, that she died, so December, JonBenet was like, no, I don't want to dress the same. I want to wear this. And so Patsy was like annoyed at her daughter. And then, like I said earlier, JonBenet had regressed in her potty training. And she would always like either pee herself or she wanted like an adult figure to wipe for her. Which apparently at this age, it's not that uncommon for like kids to not be fully potty trained. But they think that the theory is that Patsy was already annoyed at her daughter for not wanting to dress the same. And then got mad at her daughter for wetting the bed and then punished her by, like, smacking her on the vagina or something. I don't know. And then she, like, pushed her, and she fell and hit her head on the side of her bathtub in her bathroom. Because they claim this all happened in the bathroom. So she fell and hit her head on the bathtub, and that caused, like, crack in the skull.
Isn't peeing the bed also a sign of abuse?
Yes. But there was no evidence of sexual abuse. Like, they checked all of her medical records, and there was no evidence of, like, sexual abuse besides what they found on the day of the crime.
Did the mom have a history of being, like, very aggressive?
There was no evidence at all of abuse, except when we get to a further theory. After she, like, pushed her daughter hit her head, and Patsy panicked, thinking her daughter was already dead, and decided to cover up the murder and protect her family instead of, like, potentially going to jail. They also said that she might have been jealous of the attention her daughter was getting, because Patsy at one point was also a beauty star. She was Miss West Virginia, I think, Miss West Virginia, and she competed in, like, the Miss America pageant. Patsy Ramsey gave conflicting stories from what happened the morning of. In the first story she told police the day of, she claimed that she came downstairs, like, and didn't do laundry, that she instead checked on JonBenet and saw that the bedroom was empty and just assumed she was in Burke's room, and then she went downstairs and found the note. And then in the next story, when she was eventually interviewed by the police, she said that she went downstairs, did laundry, did not check on JonBenet, and then went downstairs and found the note. So yeah, she eventually, they get interviewed by the DA's office, and the person who interviewed her likened it to talking to someone with multiple personality disorder. He claimed he had never interviewed someone with multiple personality disorder, but he assumed this is what it would be like. Yeah, because apparently she would go from, like, crying to, like, flirting with him to, like, being mad, like, really randomly.
I feel like that's something someone should get diagnosed for before a detective's like, I think they got it. You are not in the place and you've not had any experience.
Yeah, it's just, he was saying that, the interview was incredibly weird, is basically what he was saying. I
would have asked for her to be, evaluated for that if I so thought that's what she had.
The next theory is the theory that, but yeah, that's basically the Patsy Ramsey theory, which is, like, it's pretty strong.
Yeah, other than the fact that when she saw the body, she was hysterical.
In fact, when they did the, like, CNN interview, she was drugged out of her mind because apparently she was, like, she couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, she couldn't do anything. She was, like, so, like,
yeah, and that's
distraught.
Like trauma of a mother. Like, you lost your baby, and if she had known this had already happened, unless she, like, did it and then the husband covered it up so she didn't get to see JonBenet after the fact and was like, oh my God, this is how I don't know, but
yeah. The next theory is the theory that everyone loves, which is the Burke Ramsey theory. Again, gonna stress, Burke Ramsey, do not sue us. We are not CNN. We do not have money. I think it was CBS. We are not CBS. We do not have money.
And apparently you're not cute.
No, don't say that.
Oh. Apparently you're not cute.
So the next theory is the Burke Ramsey theory. He did this kind of got brought up for two reasons. The first being, he did a super awkward interview with Dr. Phil.
Like, how old was he?
Like, in his 20s.
Oh.
But, like, if you look at this interview, like, I watched it and I was uncomfortable.
I want to watch it.
Because, like, he was, like, smiling the entire time. Like, talking about his dead little sister, smiling. It was bizarre. The police never considered Burke a suspect. And the theory is that Burke killed his sister and the parents covered it up. There was evidence of Burke bullying his little sister, including one time where he hit her in the face with a golf club, smeared poop on her bed and her belongings.
He need his ass whooped.
Yeah. Further, his parents blatantly preferred his sister. Like, there is a video that Patsy Ramsey did for, like, a magazine or some famous thing, because she was always wanting to be on TV, where she was like, this is my daughter, JonBenet. Like, JonBenet was close to her, and then, like, out to the side was, like, Burke. And she was like, this is my son, Burke. And, like, it was kind of obvious that, like, they definitely preferred JonBenet. And so something that I found interesting was that was not always how it was. Before JonBenet was born, Burke was the center of his parents' world. Like,
because he was the only child.
Because he was the only child. And then as soon as
JonBenet...
JonBenet...
no, he had the older sister.
Well, yeah, but they were much older.
Okay.
They were, like, in college. And then JonBenet was born, and the attention switched off of him. And if you remember...
Narcissist!
Yes! If you remember from our cult podcast, that's, like, one of the ways you make a narcissist personality, basically. So, like, if Burke Ramsey starts a cult, would not be surprised. Everyone said he was asleep the entire morning. Like, he was asleep until 7 when his parents brought him somewhere. Despite police coming in his room, his parents coming in the room, turning on the lights, like, people loudly speaking downstairs. But on the police phone call, they claim that they heard a voice say, "What did you find?" That sounded like Burke Ramsey. And then they thought they heard John Ramsey say, "We're not speaking to you," like, aggressively, like how a dad speaks to a kid that they're mad at. So the theory is that, if you remember, they found a bowl of pineapple and milk on the counter with Burke's fingerprints on it. The theory is that JonBenet had, like, annoyed him somehow earlier that day, and then she came downstairs and she, like, stole a piece of pineapple out of his bowl, and that was just the tipping point for him. And so she ran, eating the pineapple, ran away, like, laughing, and Burke followed her and grabbed the flashlight. He eventually cornered her and hit her with the flashlight, which, like, caused the abrasion to the skull. Remember the stun gun marks?
Mm-hmm.
apparently, they also happened to match up with the way that the train in the train room connected. It was like a prong sticking out of the train that would feed into like holes on the other end of the track. And they were perfectly distanced for the marks on JonBenet's body. So the theory is that after he knocked her in the head with the flashlight, he took these trains and like poked her, trying to get her to wake up. And when she didn't, he went and told his parents, who freaked out. Like, they were like, he killed our daughter. Like, we can't lose both of our children. Patsy even said that if she lost Burke, she would have nothing left to live for in a later interview. So they believe that Burke hit JonBenet in the head, and that the parents staged it to make it look like a break-in. And evidence of this kind of goes in with the evidence from why they think Patsy did it, where it was like her, similar to her handwriting, the fibers, like all of that kind of feeds in to like the theory. And then he was interviewed an hour after his sister's body was found, and he never asked what happened to his sister. Like, they didn't tell him anything that was going on. That's just that like JonBenet was missing. And then when he was interviewed by a police after her body was found, he never was like, oh, hey, like, what's going on with my sister? Like, have y'all found her yet? He didn't ask.
And kids will ask you the dumbest question.
Yeah.
Like, why'd that light look like that? Why it's snowing outside? And he didn't ask the most obvious questions.
Yeah, he didn't ask at all. So the theory is that he accidentally killed JonBenet, and the parents staged it to look like a break-in. However, they wouldn't have had to do that, because in the state of Colorado at that time, or at least in like the Boulder County, whatever it was, children under the age of 10 were considered too young to be charged with murder. So he couldn't have even been charged.
But the parents have known that, though. Because I can't even tell you.
True.
I wasn't born and raised in Kentucky, but I spent a lot of time in Kentucky. I can't tell you what majority of the laws are as it pertains to murder and stuff.
Yeah.
Other than don't do it.
Yeah, please don't. So there's two other theories. Those are like the two big ones, though. The first one, this one's kind of dumb, but basically there was a guy who was like teaching somewhere in Asia, and he confessed to the murder in Asia, and he came back and they arrested him, and then he was ruled out by DNA and let go. But like we said, DNA could have been corrupted. His name was John Mark Carr. I didn't do that much looking into him. But I don't know. It was just one
of those laughable ones.
Yeah.
Like, you're just doing this for attention.
So then there is the stranger theory. And this one introduced a lot of suspects, but only one of which I think is pretty interesting.
Is it the Fleet one? The Fleet guy? Do they think he was involved at all?
No, they think it was Santa.
What?
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Here it is. Okay. So, like I said, 4 days before the murder, the Ramseys had a Christmas party.
Oh, okay. That kind of Santa. Yeah.
So at this Christmas party, did you think I meant real Santa? Wait.
Yeah, you just said Santa. I was like, what?
No, Santa. Wait,
Rudolph
a fake Santa. Stop. 4 days before, they had a Christmas party, and they had a Santa. And JonBenet was giving like tours of the house, because they were also being filmed to like have their house showcased on TV. And so the film crew was going in every room, like filming this entire house. And so the entire house was open to the public. And JonBenet was giving tours, which is kind of sus. And one of the people there was Bill McReynolds,
a.k.a. Santa,
who was playing Santa. And apparently Santa told JonBenet that he was going to visit her after Christmas. And to not tell anybody. But she told her friend. And her friend told the police. It later came out that him and his wife, whose name was Janet McReynolds, they had a daughter who had been kidnapped like a year or two before, and with a friend. And the friend had been sexually assaulted, and the daughter hadn't been. And they had been like released. Further, Janet McReynolds had written a story about a girl who gets murdered in a basement.
It was Santa.
Right? The theory with this is that while the Ramseys were out, someone broke into the house. And how did they break into the house, you ask? We're not sure. However, there were like 26 keys to the Ramseys' house, and like 15 of them were unaccounted for.
I have 3 keys to my house. I know where 2 of them are.
You should find the third one.
I really should.
Yikes. There were like missing keys. Plus, there was the open window in the basement. So the theory is that someone broke into the house while the Ramseys were out, and that is when they wrote the very long note. Then, when the Ramseys got back, they hid in an upstairs room which had evidence of disturbance. There was a window in that room that would have been a good vantage point to see if someone was coming home. And then there was also the unidentified shoe print and an unidentified palm print found on the door jamb of the room that JonBenet was found in. JonBenet had been giving tours of the house to everyone, which could have included like the train room, at which point someone could have seen the door to the like wine cellar where her body was discovered. So they would have known how to get there. And they also would have seen JonBenet's room. But yeah, so that is most of the evidence and but like a decent amount of theories. The case the entire time was plagued by improper police work, infighting within the police and the DA, consistent leaks to the media, the entire case. Everyone was talking to the media and accusing everyone else of doing it. Like literally, the police were talking to the media and then turning around and accusing the DA of being the one to release the information. Like, it was insane.
That is heavy. That is so much.
Yeah. So, I don't think this case will ever be solved unless there is a deathbed confession.
Because there was so much corruption.
Yeah, there was so much corruption. Patsy Ramsey has already passed away. Her ovarian cancer that she had when JonBenet was a baby came back, and it unfortunately took her life. So she has passed. John Ramsey has since remarried. He still claims he's looking for like justice for JonBenet. And then all of her siblings have like kind of moved on with their lives, trying to live as normal lives as possible.
Burke included?
Burke included. Yep. I've joked a lot about him suing us, and it's because he sued CBS or CNN. I don't remember. It started with a C because...
Could have been Cartoon Network. We don't know.
It was not Cartoon Network. Because they ran a story where they were like, hey, Burke did it. Like, literally, the conclusion was, like, Burke did it. And if you're interested in watching that, I highly recommend. It's called The Case of JonBenet Ramsey. You do have to pay for it on Amazon Prime. It's $2.99 for each for 2 episodes, so like $5.96 or something like that. But I highly recommend it. I watched the whole thing and I learned a lot. Like 90% of why the evidence that I have that Burke did it was from that like docuseries. I don't think it'll ever be solved. If the person who committed this crime is listening, which like I hope you are,
go yourself.
Yeah, but also like please make a deathbed confession. Like
kudos to you for doing all this research and gathering all this information, because good God, there was a lot.
Yes, there was a lot.
So everyone say thank you to Elizabeth in the comments. Please also comment, like, subscribe, follow us on all our social medias.
Please.
We hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you have your own theories or know any additional evidence that wasn't covered in this podcast, because again, there was a crap ton, so we couldn't cover everything. But if you have anything that you want to add to this, please leave a comment. Let us know if there's any other case that you would like Elizabeth to go down a rabbit hole to figure out. And yeah, follow us on all our social medias. If you're watching us through YouTube, we have Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many others, and vice versa. So like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all social medias, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.